What happens in this strait affects the world.
Picture a wooden merchant ship caught in a 4-knot tidal rip. The wind is howling off towering limestone cliffs, whipping the sea into short, violent waves that threaten to swallow the vessel whole. Millennia before automated rudders or satellite telemetry or motorized engines, surviving this passage depended on elite seamanship and a precise understanding of local currents. To follow our investigation into the maritime technology of the ancient Near East, subscribe and join us as we break down the engineering of the strait. Consistent access to the markets of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley required pilots to first overcome these specific environmental hazards. The Strait of Hormuz is a geographic bottleneck. It acts as a physical valve connecting the deep waters of the Gulf of Oman to the shallow enclosed basin of the Persian Gulf. This diagram illustrates the fluid dynamics. Cold, dense ocean water violently collides with the warm, shallow basin, generating turbulent standing waves. As millions of cubic meters squeeze through this choke point, it creates tidal rips exceeding 4 knots, overpowering a wooden ship. Above the waterline, the southern approach is defined by the jaws of the Musandam Peninsula. These sheer limestone cliffs drop 1,000 meters straight into the sea, generating unpredictable wind shear that can capsize a low-riding vessel without warning. The combination of rapid currents, wind shear, and shallow exits created a physical trap that actively rejected human navigation. The northern approaches to the strait present an entirely different threat. The islands of Kesh and Larak are surrounded by a maze of shallow mudflats and submerged reefs, hidden just below these calm turquoise waters. A standard Mediterranean warship, built with rigid mortise and tenon joints and iron nails, would likely shatter upon striking one of these coral sandbars. To survive these shoals, local shipbuilders developed the stitched plank hull. These vessels were constructed by binding timber with organic fibers rather than rigid metal fasteners. By binding the planks with coconut coir rope, the hull gained a mechanical advantage. If the ship struck a reef, the ropes allowed the wooden structure to flex and absorb the impact energy, bending where a rigid hull would crack. Shipwrights then coated the wood in natural bitumen sourced from Susiana. This petroleum-based sealant kept the flexible joints watertight and protected the wood from destructive marine borers. In this environment, indigenous shipwrights prioritized structural flexibility over the brute rigidity of imperial naval architecture. Even with a resilient ship, navigating the island channels remained perilous. Sudden coastal fogs or seasonal storms could eliminate celestial navigation, leaving a crew with no visible horizon. To maintain their bearings, ancient pilots relied on promontory sightlines. By visually aligning specific mountain peaks across the water, they could triangulate their position within the narrow channel. The red hills of Hormuz Island were particularly crucial. These distinct mineral layers stood out against the horizon, serving as a reliable landmark for northbound maritime traffic. Local navigators turned the geography of the basin into a navigational instrument, memorizing the specific shapes and colors of the coastline to guide their path. When visual landmarks were obscured by fog or night, pilots faced the challenge of approaching shallow estuaries without grounding the ship. Their primary tool was the lead sounding line, a weighted rope dropped over the bow to measure the water's exact depth. This diagram shows the detail of the lead space. By packing animal grease into a recessed cavity, the weight would capture a physical sample of the seabed, pulling up layers of mud, sand, or shell fragments. Pilots interpreted these sediment samples, alongside biological indicators, such as specific sea snakes, to verify their shore distance. Through this multi-sensory approach, ancient mariners mapped the invisible topography of the seabed, turning the environment into a readable dataset. Emerging from the bottleneck, a stitched vessel finally reaches the calmer, more predictable waters of the inner Persian Gulf. This combination of flexible engineering and sensory piloting established the maritime connection between the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. These technical adaptations allowed for the sustained exchange of goods between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, leading to the construction of permanent trade settlements and brick foundations along the coast. These early maritime networks survived because local navigators were able to convert a lethal physical barrier into a functional path for international commerce. As the wealth moving through this channel grew, it attracted the attention of expanding regional powers. Rigid, heavy imperial warships eventually arrived in the strait, attempting to seize control of the route from the indigenous merchants who originally navigated it. Join us for Part 2, where we examine how the Achaemenid and Sasanian navies attempted to project power across these turbulent waters. Subscribe to catch the next episode. It is the autumn of 325 BCE. Alexander the Great has ordered his admiral, Nearchus, to sail a Macedonian fleet from the mouth of the Indus River toward the unknown waters of the Strait of Hormuz. These sailors were trained in the Mediterranean, and they were completely unprepared for what they found. The fleet's heavy galleys were immediately battered by erratic tidal currents, intense thermal winds, and hidden shallow shoals. Nearchus realized his crews could not read the local sea signs. To prevent a total catastrophe, he sought out native coastal pilots near Macron to guide the Macedonian warships through the complex waters ahead. When the fleet reached the narrowest point of the strait, lookouts sighted the jagged peaks of Cape Ras Musandam. These craggy mountains rise sharply from the dark water, creating a massive geographic obstacle. The local pilots warned Nearchus that the southern shore was a death trap of unpredictable downdrafts and whirlpools. Heeding their advice, he kept the fleet close to the northern Iranian coast to maintain a safe passage. Upon reaching the sheltered roadsteads around Hormuz Island, Nearchus ordered the entire fleet to be hauled ashore. On these red sands, the crews scraped barnacles from the wooden hulls, repaired damaged rudders, and resupplied fresh water. Nearchus survived the transit, but his struggle demonstrated that navigation alone was insufficient. Truly holding the strait required permanent naval infrastructure, capable of sustaining a fleet in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. This graphic shows the core logistical problem of ancient naval power. A single trireme required over 1,500 liters of fresh water every single day, just for its oarsmen. A full imperial fleet would need hundreds of thousands of liters. However, the islands surrounding the strait are intensely arid and lack natural springs. Without a reliable water source, long-term blockades or permanent deployments were impossible. To overcome this, Sasanian and Achaemenid engineers carved massive subterranean rainwater cisterns directly into the limestone rock. Lined with waterproof hydraulic plaster, these structures acted as artificial reservoirs for the fleet. This infrastructure allowed imperial patrol fleets to remain deployed for months at a time without returning to the mainland for supplies. Under monarchs like Shapur II, the fleet achieved tactical mastery over the choke point. They established a tactical convoy system, where heavily armed war galleys took defensive positions on the flanks of merchant ships, shielding them from ambushes. This was supported by a network of coastal watchtowers broadcasting tide and threat alerts, while customs points on strategic islands tracked and registered every vessel. Sasanian captains also mastered tide-synchronized sailing, timing departures to coincide perfectly with the flow of tidal currents. By locking into these currents, fleets traveled at double their normal speed, conserving the crew's energy for combat the moment they arrived. Through this combination of engineering and tidal mastery, the Sasanians achieved total control over the movement of goods and warships through the choke point. These systems turned the Strait of Hormuz into the safest and most lucrative sea lane of the ancient maritime Silk Road, securing the empire's wealth. This control was built on the seamless integration of natural geography with naval doctrine and imperial infrastructure. The lesson established in antiquity was simple. Success in these waters requires absolute respect for the region's winds, its currents, and its geography. The focus on freshwater logistics and island-based defense established a strategic pattern that continues to the present day. Even with modern technology, control of the Strait of Hormuz still depends on the same geographic factors and infrastructure needs first mastered by these ancient navies.